Thanks again to Mike Jones and John Keim, and I now just continue my journey back in my media room past by welcoming in yet another former colleague that I covered the Commanders with back in the day. Now I watch her on television along with you on Get Up, SportsCenter, and the rest of ESPN's NFL platforms. It is our good friend Kim Martin. Kimberly, how are you, ma'am?
I'm good. You literally just got the squad back.
I mean, y'all still got the information. I got a show. We might as well put our skills to good use. I just ask the questions and let you guys tell me things. That's really how the skills are being put to use. I just sit back and let you guys carry. No, but you had some really, I think, great reporting on kind of talking to some folks around this search and this situation. And it runs counter to some narratives that I feel like got out of control about Ben Johnson being the favorite and the Commanders were crushed and, kind of caught with their pants down and whatever. The way you actually
I'm going to push back on that. On that.
Yeah, so what's the actual information you have?
Okay, so like a week and a half ago, it seemed, actually what I was told from people in league circles was like, oh yeah, Ben Johnson to Washington, done deal. Like that's the NFL's worst kept secret, right? That's what I heard from people a week and a half ago and change. But the days, in recent days, talking to people, more people in the league and also more people internally. And you got to be honest, like everybody wants to act like the Commanders, yet again, they botched this, Like, let me tell you, from talking to people, Ben Johnson did not impress everybody in his interview. So when they left that initial interview, they still had questions. He was not the clear-cut favorite, this is the guy, right? They were still interested in talking to other people. They still had a list of other people. Now, he was still a candidate in there, which is why they still scheduled a second interview. But this was not, as a lot of people thought, a shoe-in Ben Johnson, this is his job. Now, I think, I used to, before I came to the Washington Post, I was a beat writer for the Jets. And I think when you cover teams that have been mired in dysfunction or can't seem to get out of their own way, I think it is very easy to kind of fall into that trap of like, here we go again. They done messed up again. And I don't think that's the case here. When I talked to NFL GM, I had a conversation with an NFL GM yesterday, and he said, he was looking for a head coach this hiring cycle as well. And he said, you got to ask yourself, do you want somebody just for their offense or defense, or are you trying to hire a leader for your team? Because what everybody thought before the hires were made, across the league, teams that have QB situations, they got to go they got to go with an offensive mind, a young guy. We've seen a lot of younger candidates, but there have been a lot of defensive guys that have been hired as head coaches this cycle. And really what it comes down to, talking to so many execs and GMs, is you need to be able to lead these young men. And the game is different. The players are different. And so when I think about Dan Quinn, he impressed in his interview. You need somebody who's going to stand up there, have credibility, talk to these guys, be a player's coach. And Ron Rivera was a player's coach. But I think the difference here with Dan Quinn is you guys have an actual traditional front office structure now. That's the thing that Commanders fans should be happy about. That you have Adam Peters, first-time GM. He's got to nail this draft. He's got to nail the QB situation. And with Dan Quinn's input, you develop a roster. But it's not, Dan Quinn is now responsible for personnel and coaching. And it's more of a traditional setup, which I think bodes well for both Adam Peters and Dan Quinn.
Totally. And to be 100% clear here, yes, and on this, yes, and there is an actual accountability with Dan Quinn. We'll talk about that with former Seahawks linebacker KJ Wright at the top of the hour versus Ron Rivera talked a lot about accountability, and I don't think actually provided it. And part of that might have been the structure, too. He had a lot going on, which Dan Quinn won't. So, Kim, let's pretend we're on the Get Up set, and it's, we ignore the process, and, we kind of, I don't know, we use a magical time machine here. If I told you at the beginning of all of this, Commanders hired Dan Quinn, you think you're sitting on that desk praising the hire?
I get it. We had this conversation on First Take too today, and Stephen A. we're all asked, like, how do you feel about it? And Stephen A was like, nah, I'm not sold on it. And I asked the follow-up, because of when he was hired, being the last guy, does that change things? I think if you're a Commanders fan, it's hard to feel. I would not be surprised if there were Commanders fans who did not feel pumped, because they literally are the last. It's almost like we're the last team picked, man. We're the last team that got somebody. So when you have the introductory press conference with Quinn and it says, and they're saying, this is the guy, it's sort of like, well, if he's the guy, why did it take so long to hire the guy? But I think that necessarily is an issue. You want to get the right guy, because what we've seen over the last few years, I think within the last 3 years, every team has turned over its OC. We have had head coaches gone after one season or 2 seasons. And you have a lot of head coaches right now that are lame ducks heading into this year. So I'm fine if it takes a long time to narrow down and make sure you get the right guy. So if you thought Ben Johnson might have been it, and then something gave you pause and you're like, you know what? Actually, you know what? This is the guy we want. I'm cool with that. What should trouble people a little bit is the fact that this process, I think, hindsight, took longer than they probably wanted it to. And now you have the top OCs, and now Quinn is obviously a defensive guy, but now the top OCs are off the board, theoretically. You know, I'm going to say top, meaning like the guys that were highly coveted, right? So now it's like you're looking around, it's musical, okay, like who else is left? And you don't want a fan base to feel like we're just left with scraps. But there are a lot of talented football guys out there, and there are a lot of first-time head coaches. Dan Quinn needs to nail the OC hire, and Adam Peters has to nail the quarterback. Like, that literally is it. And it doesn't, I don't think the Commanders are in this, like, woe is me situation. When you talk to people about Dan Quinn, he's respected. He is a player's coach, and he knows what he's doing. And I don't think the Cowboys, game against the Packers, while it was embarrassing, I don't think that should be completely used against Dan Quinn, because there are a lot of coaches right now who got head coaching jobs, and there's a reason they're available right now. Their team's lost. Now, what the Cowboys did on defense and offense was terrible, and I don't think his previous head coaching record necessarily should be held against him, because you can make the same argument with Raheem Morris. The expectation is that you've learned about yourself and you've grown, so that the next time you're in this position, you know how to be a better head coach.
Have you talked to coaches about that over the years? Guys like Pete Carroll, who was a pretty mediocre head coach his first time around the NFL. Obviously, he had a lot of years and a lot of college success in between it. But whether it's, Pete Carroll, Belichick, on down the list you go. Tony Dungy was a guy that was a retread. He happened to retread with Peyton Manning and win a Super Bowl. Is there something that those coaches that you think have done well their second time around that Dan Quinn needs to do to be successful in Washington?
Well, I think, his focus will be defense. That's why it's really important who he has around him on the offensive side of the ball, who's going to help groom this young quarterback. But I think, look at any coach who gets another opportunity. You're in the job for the first time, so you don't even know how to be a head coach. I think what trips guys up a lot of times is if you're a coordinator, you're so used to focusing on your side of the ball. As a head coach, you are a CEO of a team, of an organization. In some respects, beyond just the quarterback, you're also the face of the organization as well. So you're being pulled in multiple directions. And you need to be able to trust that the people you hire can also disseminate your message, keep the culture intact within their individual meeting rooms. Like, it's got to be a trickle-down effect. And what you need to be able to be a clear communicator of what you want, so that even when you're not in the room, people understand that the standard still has to be met. And I think when you have a job for the first time, let's be honest. Like, anytime we start a new job, we're not going to know what the hell we're doing. Like, that's just the reality. Right. And you need the reps. At the same time, we talk about quarterbacks, you need reps. But you also have to understand that there are a lot of working relationships within a front office. Like, as a head coach, you're working with your GM. If those two people are not in lockstep, your organization is in trouble. Like, you got to be team players. And when things don't go well, hypothetically, new regime, are they going to hit the ground running? I don't know. But if they don't, you still have to maintain whatever vision Adam Peters and Dan Quinn set out to create whatever vision they had for this franchise, whatever plan for the long term for sustainable success, they have to stick to that plan. And if anybody deviates, that's where problems arise. I think you've got to be a good delegator. But I think, given that Peters is in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan, who also has experience with Dan Quinn, in the NFL, people trust the people that they know, right? So they're going to ask, what's he like to work with? What kind of dude is he? And I've never heard a bad thing about Dan Quinn. Besides, the thing that people point to was his record in Atlanta, and then obviously how the Cowboys finished. But in all honesty, he took the Cowboys defense. I think they were 28th in points, 23 in yards allowed, when he got there. And we've praised this defense in the time that he's been there. So I don't want to hold one game against him, but he has an opportunity to completely rebuild the culture and set a new standard as what's expected in Washington.
Yes, it just feels like a very anti-Washington hire, and considering what the history has been in Washington, that's great. Sign me up. Kimberley Martin, you can read her reporting, obviously, through ESPN, ESPN.com. Mostly, you're going to catch her on television. First Take, Get Up, Sports Center, NFL Live, on down the list. Y'all know how to watch the NFL coverage on ESPN. You're very smart people, this audience. Kim, always great to catch up. Hopefully, I'll catch you next week in Vegas or in Indy at the Combine.
For sure. Yeah.
And until then, safe travels and have fun with the rest of the NFL weekend.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.